Our workshop is based on the concept of super diversity, which was developed by a scientist, uh, Vukovic. This concept helps us to think about any kind of group as not only a group, but made by individual beings, each one different to another. So, to consider the diversity of each individual being in a group. This type of approach help us not to consider, for example, migrant as only migrant group, but as a group which has different kind of potentialities and difficulties at the same time. We want to give workshop which can deal with each person, so with a methodology which help everybody to find his own identity in a group, and at the same time to connect each other thanks to tools which empower each individual being. So the question is, which kind of tool everybody needs to connect to others? It's language, for example, but it's not only that. It's the first time we have to recognize the others, to understand how they move, how they speak, and to understand how, starting from what we are, we can create a bridge between us. Theater is very useful in this kind of process because it makes clear who we are. Because it helps to stand up and say, I am this. This is my experience. This how I react to the others. So it creates consciousness to people who practice it. And at the same time, it gives some tools to create this bridge. So with migrants, we always face two steps. The first one is to know themselves much better than they think they are. They have a great experience on their back. Some of them are very dramatic and tragic. Some others are extraordinary. So we want them to understand that their past is not only a burden, but it's something that can be very precious to others. Secondly, we want to give them the tools to create bridges between them and the local population. There are some problems, of course. First of all, the recruitment of migrants is not easy because they usually are very skeptical towards the local population. Probably because they have suffered so much and they have been betrayed during their long journey to come to Italy so many times. So they are usually very skeptical to give trust to others. And trust is what we have to actually really ask for. So the first step is to go to the place where people used to gather, for example, or they go for assistance, and try to convince them, giving them the trust. So this is the first point. So you have a responsibility. You have their trust. Then there are some other problems, like most of them are illiterate or totally illiterate. So they hardly can speak properly in their own language. They speak dialect. Some of them, they speak very few Italians, and most of all, they are not able to learn Italian. So you have to understand how to create a dialogue. And again, theater can be very helpful, thanks to the non-verbal communication. But we have to be very attentive about the so-called body languages, because different cultures has different meanings. Usually people from Africa, they love to dance, but if you think about Asian and especially Chinese, they don't like it all. It's not their culture at all unless it's very traditional dance. So you should know first, where do they come from? Because body language could be very different from country to country, and their background too. Sometimes you always beware that their country could be tricky, because you think, for example, an African, all the African can sing very well. It's absolutely a stereotype. Then during the workshop, it's very rare that people in this kind of situation could attend an entire workshop. So you have to expect a movement, let's say, of go and return, and your way of working should be at the same time your method to stop and begin exactly where you stop with a person. So you have to understand this kind of flow between the people. Then there is a very important thing. It's important that the workshop shouldn't go further than 4 or 5 months. Usually it's the maximum they stay in a place. The refugees, they have very frequent flyers, let's say. So they stay in a place very few months. If you are lucky, 6 months. Well, sometimes, like less than 10%, they decide to stay in some place. But if you are a group of 15 people, it means 1. Another things that you have to understand when you are talking about this kind of group is that it's very seldom that you can work on a script. You always have to work step by step, trying to create material through the process of rehearsal. So it's quite impossible unless they are very keen on the language, for example. They can learn by heart a text, a written text. They can learn it by repeating several times during the workshops. Then, our workshop is based on idea on intimacy, because we believe that through intimacy we can break through and we can overcome the stereotypes. But it's a question, it's a problem usually for the people who are not very able to speak a foreign language. So intimacy can be at the same time a very important tool to break stereotypes, and at the same time creates some problems related to languages and the dialogue between languages. So you have to understand that if this happens, you have to create a very, let's say, we call it small choreography that can help them to overcome this difficulty. It can be like a small hands language, or eyes, or other kind of tools. For example, you can write on a paper. You can use writing. It's very beautiful writing. Usually, some country has a very long tradition in writing, like Japanese. But this, of course, is related to people who is a high level of literacy. So, altogether, it's really a challenge to work with groups of migrants, but it's really, really enriching our work.